So hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by MBS. We've also got a guest speaker with us today from Lake Flato. We'll introduce in a moment, and we're also going to be demonstrating some of the Enscape visualization products. The title of today's webinar is The Benefits of BIM and 3D Visualization. I'm your host. My name's Lee Jones. I'm the head of manufacturer solutions at MBS. I'm an architectural technologist by trade, but I've spent 20 odd years working in the construction product manufacturing sector and really working around visualization and product data for construction products and systems. Joining me today is Daniel Stine. He's the Director of Design Technology from Lake Flato. Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me, Lee. Thanks for the opportunity to present on behalf of Lake Flato. I'm as you said, the Director of Design Technology and located in San Antonio, Texas in the United States.
Excellent. Thanks very much. So we're going to be hearing a lot more from Dan later on. He's going to be running us through a case study presentation of what they do with BIM and how they use the visualization techniques, etc. within Lake Flato. Okay, so let's roll on with the presentation. For anybody that's not familiar with MBS, MBS is the National Building Specification. We've been around for the past 50 years. We were set up by the Royal Institute of British Architects back in 1973. And ultimately today, we have two core products. One is a specification software, which is used by thousands of different specifiers around the world. It's to write specifications, but it's also used by manufacturers as well. And then the second is a product library where we can list product information. Manufacturers can host BIM objects and so forth. So the two things are interconnected, and that'll become apparent throughout the presentation. But ultimately, whether you're a manufacturer or whether you're a specifier, our customers are your customers and the same stakeholders throughout the project. What we're going to cover today is predominantly around BIM. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what BIM is and why it's not just 3D models, but obviously that's going to take a big focus on the presentation today. I'm going to talk a bit about BIM libraries and why they're important. There's a little bit of misconception in the industry around these things. And on that note, talk about some mistakes and misconceptions with BIM content, particularly if you're a manufacturer that's providing content. There's some do's and don'ts that you really need to adhere to make sure that these things work and perform correctly for the specifiers who are going to be using them. And then being in the model, is it being in the spec? I think it is, and I'll show you why through the MBS tools later on. And then we're going to talk about the visualization benefits, and this is where I'll hand over to Dan, and we'll get a great case study from what they do at Lake Flato using the Enscape software there as well. And then we'll wrap up and summarize and give you some call to actions. So BIM. It's not just 3D models. For anybody that's seen any of the webinars that I've done over the past 12 months, the first couple of slides in this deck I've used before, so apologies if you've seen these, but I think it really needs this message to be driven home. In the industry, there's a bit of a misconception that BIM is something relatively new. In the UK, it was mandated in 2016 for public funded projects, and it's used widely around the world as well. But actually, has been around for half a century in theory. It was only the fact that it was coined building information modeling as a term that gave it this new presence. The second thing is that software isn't BIM. BIM is a process. So there's a lot of misconception, particularly with manufacturers of construction products, that Revit is BIM. Now, Revit is an absolutely fantastic tool that allows you to generate designs in a BIM format, but those 3D softwares effectively are a tool to allow you to do the BIM process in the same way that a pen allows you to do the process of writing. A pen isn't writing and Revit isn't BIM, but it is a key element in using that tool to do the process. And then for manufacturers, BIM content themselves aren't something sort of new as a concept. It's just a new format, a new way that you need to be providing this information. So historically, manufacturers would have provided stencils or different details to allow architects, designers, etc., to replicate their products and their layouts and designs. Moving into the 80s and 90s, it was then replaced by DWGs, so things like AutoCAD files and so forth. And then alongside this, manufacturers would have had catalogs, technical brochures that would have listed all the information, which subsequently was superseded by the websites. And today with BIM content, really, that's ultimately why it is. It is the CAD and it's the product literature all in one place in a structured format. And we're going to cover a little bit more about that later on. I'd like to talk to you now a little bit about BIM libraries. There's can be a bit of frustration with manufacturers and a lot of misunderstanding as to where they need to host content, who goes where. Should it just be held on their own websites? Should it be on a third-party site? Which one should it go forth? And I think that the reason behind the BIM libraries and the whole benefit of these things is that it puts everything in one place. Now, looking at a completely different sector, and pretty much this is UK specific, but I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of different examples of this around the world. Argos, a company in the UK, set up a catalogue in 1973 with the idea that consumers of general household goods could go to one place, find all the information they need about thousands of different products, and get them all from this one single source. Today, that catalogue doesn't exist anymore. There was a bit of tears shed when they finally canned it, but in a sustainable manner, it's all done on a website, and it's just a case of going and searching for the products. Now, MBS, absolutely no different. The RIBA product selector that we set up in 1982 was to do just the same thing. It was to allow specifiers to find construction products and all of the relevant information that they needed to allow them to specify those products in one place. It had a bit of a sort of invention in 1986, and it made it a bit more easy to follow. But still to today, it's followed that same format, only it was in a web format for probably the best 10, 15 years until it was replaced. So regardless of whether you're selling houses, whether you're selling cars, or whether you're selling fixings for general DIY purposes, any business that you would like to go to, you can typically find somebody that will provide many manufacturers different products and systems in one place. And that's what MBS do today. So the RIBA product selector has been replaced with MBS Source. It's a one-stop shop where manufacturers can host their product information. They can host literature, catalogs, installation manual details, that kind of thing, third-party certificates, but also their BIM content as well for specifiers to obtain and use within their projects in one place. Now, on that premise that, yeah, you should have your own data, you should host that on your own website, by all means, having it in a library where people can access this multitude of different products and systems in one place as its clear benefits. From a specifier's perspective, being able to find everything under one roof is going to save them time instead of flicking from one page to the next or one website to the next. And knowing that data has been structured in the same uniform template by the people that are providing that obviously makes that process a lot easier. That said, for manufacturers that use MBS, if you host BIM content within MBS Source for people to use, you can also use our syndication tool. We've got a great example here from Symphony Kitchens. They've got hundreds of different kitchen cabinet objects, etc. And what you can see is their own website here. And you can freely download the content from that. But this is actually powered by MBS Source. So in the background, when somebody clicks on this link to download one of these objects, it's actually coming from MBS. And by default, MBS provide a really great suite of analytics for manufacturers to actually gain insight as to what products and systems are popular, what's being used. The same thing is being fed through from this because it's the same source. So what are the mistakes and misconceptions? Well, the first thing is, I think I'd like to talk about, and being a manufacturer and implementing BIM sort of 10 years ago in one of the largest sanitary ware companies in the world, is that misunderstanding the process of it is probably the first hurdle. Now, marketing is usually the area where manufacturers will fund the budget. Now, sometimes you'll get different quotations to get things done, and sometimes the cheapest might be the most attractive, but it isn't necessarily the best route. Don't get me wrong, you could get a quote that's reasonable and your content could be built for you, or you could do this in-house and it could be a great job. However, there's been a lot of speculation, particularly around social media and different working groups within the industry, especially in the UK, about content that's not really fit for purpose. Now, if you take a residential house, there's probably around 3,000 components in a residential house. But if you then take that into a hospital or a school, high-rise building, something like that, they instantly go into the thousands, maybe even millions. Now, the key thing with BIM is that if you're adding all of these different components into the model, they all have file size. Now, the greater the detail within that model, the larger the file size typically is. So with this particular example, you can see that we've got screw threads, we've got different nuts, all the different fixings associated to it. The file size for this would be absolutely massive. Now, from a manufacturer's point of view, whilst this would be great for manufacturing too, you can do your CNC details, etc., from the CAD file from that. From a BIM perspective, it will overload the file and it'll cause the model to slow down and effectively not perform as good as it should do. So simplification, while still giving that visualization and the recognition that this product is your product or system is absolutely paramount, but making sure that you get the details of that correct and to the right level of information and the right level of detail is imperative. At MBS, we've been building BIM content now for the past 10 years. We've had the National BIM Library in the UK for 10 years and distribute these in different regions as well. And we focus very heavily on the quality. So we implemented our MBS BIM object standard, which focuses around a lot of relevant different industry standards internationally. And the key focus on this is the delivery of the quality. Now, this could be interpreted as maybe a long-winded way of doing it, but what it does is sort of expectation is that when somebody comes to use content from MBS, they know it's going to work and they know it's going to drop into the model and it's going to perform exactly as they would expect. It's just something to think in. If you're building this internally, again, the BIM object standard is free to download from the MBS website. So for manufacturers that are looking to generate their own BIM content to provide specifiers, feel free to take a copy of that. But we also offer an authoring service if you're looking to get your content created in that way as well. So is BIM marketing or data management for manufacturers? Well, I mentioned earlier it comes out of the marketing budget, but going back to that product literature and the stencils, etc., it really would have needed technical specialists' input to generate all of that information. And your BIM content is no different. So to allow somebody to use this to its best advantage, you really need to make sure that when you're planning this in and you're planning the work in, that you've got the technical team on hand and that they've got the capacity to actually have the input in this, to whether it's provide information relating to the products or to look at generating the CAD files to then replicate within the standard BIM formats, whether it be Revit, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, whatever it is that they're using to actually create those file types. So that's quite a bit of the misconceptions about BIM and where you can stand with regards to hosting as a manufacturer, etc. But what are the benefits? So for me, I think the number one thing is that there's a lot of talk in the industry and frustration that, yeah, you can be dropped into the model if you've made these nice 3D files, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you get specified. Well, with MBS, that's something that we have as a USP that absolutely means that if you're in the model, you can definitely be in the spec. And I'd just like to switch to our software now and show you a live demonstration of that. What we've got here is Revit with the MBS plugins. What you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is the standard sort of Revit example project. Anybody can access this particular file. It's just there as a demo. On the right-hand side, we've got the MBS BIM library, and then we've got the MBS specification software. Now, the specification software itself is cloud-based. You can see that we've got it here on the screen now, and it's where specifiers can log in and actually start to write their specifications. But to save time, that's also available directly within the BIM software. We have plugins for Revit, ArchiCAD, and Vectorworks for this. And you can actually see that we can control those same project specifications from within this. I'll come on to that a little bit more in a moment. But what you can do now is you can actually search for the BIM objects and actually add those to the specification directly from this plugin. So if we were going to look for roof tiles, for example, search for that, search to back, and you can see that it brings in a load of different options. Now, just for this demo's sake, I'm just going to add this one in, and straight away it's asking me for my login details. Now, this obviously is where we would make sure that people aren't utilizing the objects unnecessarily, but for manufacturers as well to provide the insights as to what was going on with their content. So I'll log into this, and it should download and drop this into Revit in a second. So what you can see now is that it's saying that this model needs to be upgraded from 2015 to 2019. I'm currently using the Revit 2019 version because we do content creation. The current version is 2021. However, with many of the BIM softwares available, they aren't backwards compatible. So if I'm working in 2019, I can't install a 2021 file into this version, but anything prior to 2019, I can. So for manufacturers' content in particular, the earlier version you can create that in, the more safe it's going to be to ensure that whoever's using it down in the end of the line, they can actually open it and work with the file. So it's asking me to upgrade to the version I'm doing. Just going to click that now, and then this should open in a moment. Right, so we have this. So you can see here that we've got this. In this particular, it's a tile, it's layered content. Two different types. We can have the layered content, which is typically a Revit project file, or we could have a family, which could be for something like a door or toilet piece of furniture, that kind of thing. I'm just going to select this, and I'm going to go and drop that directly into this project. Just ignore that for the time being, and just drop that in. So we don't actually need that now. Now this steel corrugated roof here, we might have had a design change idea or something that we might want to change it for this tiling. And just by doing that, we can actually use the MBS content. In this case, it's from Redland Tile Manufacturer. We can actually select that, and the model itself has now been updated to show the Redland tile. If we select this and we edit it, you can see that the data in the background relating to this identifies clearly that this is the Redland product. It contains a load of different information, so things like U values, etc., which are great for doing your sustainability calculations, wind loading, snow loading, that kind of thing, but also from an access point of view, things like maintenance for facilities management and so forth, all of the relevant data is also included within there in the background. So that's that. So how does that work in connecting to the spec? Obviously, that was where we're going to go to. I'm going to shut this window. And what we can do is select a project. Now, this one I've got here, New Care Homes, is just a generic project that I use when I'm doing demonstrations. It's something I set up myself. And what you can see is that we've got a load of different specifications within here. But if I click on the roofing spec for the time being, we can actually look to start adding content. Now, the difference between the MBS spec software as a plugin for the BIM software or on the website is that it actually has this little functionality here within the plugin. Now, if I hit the scan model function, what the software has done is actually scanned that model and pulled in all the relevant products that are now within that piece of software, within that project. So if I drop down to roofs and click on this, you can see that it's actually recognized that the Monya Redland product is actually within that object now. Now, if we were creating a specification for this, we could actually add some content in and say we were looking for roof tiles. We can search for that within here, and let's go for this one. We can add that into the spec. You can see that's dropped that in now. And straight away, from a specification writing perspective, the template is then all noted within this. So this is where you could fill this in to write the specification. You could select the manufacturer. There's all guidance relating to this as well. So this is really where MBS's USP is, and why we're so popular, especially in the UK and other regions such as Canada, Australia, etc., for specifiers, is that we have got a team of technical authors that are all chartered architects, engineers, contractors, civils, specialists, you name it. We've got somebody that works in the industry, that's industry experienced from that, going through all the relevant standards, guidelines, meeting with the industry trade bodies, etc., and keeping all this guidance up to date to make sure that the specification templates, now they are written, are actually as up to scratch as they can be. So the specification would be written in that sense, but if we go back to the model piece, and we'd say we'd actually written the specification for the roof now, what we could do within this is actually sync the model and the specification together. So this little two-way arrow here, if I click on this, straight away that you can see that it's highlighted the roof in this particular model in blue. We can actually associate that to the specification. So if I pick that there and we click on that, we've actually now associated that to the specification. What would happen is if that then got changed, so say in a few months down the line, somebody changed the model, but they didn't change the spec or vice versa, we would actually get a flag within the MBS system that would say, look, the specifications changed, but the object hasn't been changed within the model. Is this correct? Because they could potentially be out of sync, for example. Particularly with UK legislation changes, we've obviously got the Building a Safer Future regime being pushed forward and the draft safety bill coming into force, and making sure that the as-built model and as-built spec tie together, as well as the design model and the design spec tie together. This is a great piece of functionality to mitigate some risk where you could end up having some design details and a specification that might not necessarily coincide. So just something to think in. So looking at that, yep, we've dragged the content in from the MBS BIM library, and then we've actually added and synced that to the specification. So that's something that's unique to MBS Chorus, and it's one of the USPs that MBS have of allowing specifiers to, one, improve the collaboration between the spec and the model, but ultimately for the manufacturers to make sure that their BIM content is actually tied into the specification. The last thing to talk about is scheduling, and then I'll hand over to Dan, who's going to talk more on the visualization side and what they're doing with projects. But if we scroll down into this, and you can see straight away that there's a whole host of different doors, etc. within this. Now, we could relatively download one of these. But if I just edit this family and say this was an object that we were creating for a manufacturer, I could actually edit the data within this, and let's call this Lee Jones door, just for the time being, and I'll just show you why this is important. Okay, so we're going to change that, and the identity data, let's put the mbs.com. This could be any manufacturer's address, etc. Within there. Model, just put my initials on for now. Click apply, click OK. Then I'm going to load that back into the project and close. For now. Okay. Right, so that should have been updated. So if I edit the type within here, we should have that relevant information. Yep, that's been added in. Now, from a scheduling point of view, this is really where the content can help manufacturers and specifiers with things like bills of quantities, quotations with generating the quantities when aligning to the spec. So you'd have the specification to say that, like, these are the materials, these are the products that are going into the building. But then from a quantity point of view, the schedules can be generated with this. So if I create a new schedule, I'm just going to go down and pick doors as an example from within this. Okay. And then I'm just going to pick some of the keys that we want. So we want the manufacturer. I'm just going to add that in. We're going to add the model in. And what else do we have? URL we had in this one. It could be any of these properties that are within there. If we click OK, straight away, you can see that it's actually recognized that, yeah, the manufacturer is the MBS, the model's LJ, and here's a URL for connecting to their website. You could actually put a lot of different information in. You could configure this schedule so it just listed the numbers for specific product types and so forth. But whereas manufacturers previously would have received drawings and the specification from an architect, for example, to provide a quotation to, there's no more going through with the highlighter and counting off the different doors one by one within each floor, when you can just generate that outright from a schedule in a matter of seconds. So that's enough about the benefits from me. At this particular point, I'd like to hand over to Dan Stine from Lake Flato. And Dan, if you're ready, could we hand over to you for your presentation, please?
Thanks a lot, Lee. I'll just quickly introduce myself a little bit more. As you can see on the screen here, I am a registered architect and an adjunct instructor. I teach graduate architecture students at NDSU. I've written 14 textbooks. One of those books, 6 of them actually are on Revit, and one of them is the #1 Revit book in North America in the academic market. I've written many blog posts for Enscape, and I also have my own blog called BIM Chapters. I'm an international speaker, and while I'm mainly here to talk about visualization, the topic Lee is touching on is certainly near and dear to my heart. I'm a big advocate of standards. I helped create something called the MEP Productivity Pack, which is sold by CTC Software and ATG here in the US. And the shared parameters for that pack are freely available and currently under consideration by NEMA, the National Electric Manufacturers Association here in the US. And then I myself am on the IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society's BIM Standards Committee, where we're also looking at standard parameters for manufacturer content. And then real quick, one last thing is I also wrote the BIM standards for the Minneapolis Veterans Administration Medical Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I work for Lake Flato Architects, which Architect Magazine named the #1 firm in its Architect 50 list at the end of 2019. We've also won more Top 10 awards. The AIA award for sustainability than any other firm in the US. And currently the AIA hired us along with Bureau Happold to write the AIA Climate Action Guide for Practice, which will be a complementary guide to the COAT Top 10 list. Let's see, so moving on. A few things about Enscape before we jump into a live presentation. It's in case you haven't heard of it before, it's a real-time rendering engine. The thing I really like about it is that it's a live link to your design platform. It ties directly into Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks. So it's not what I call a dead-end export. It stays live connected to the software, as you'll see in a moment. It's also easy to use and to learn. There's a lot of ways in which you can present information out of Enscape. So on-screen presentations are probably the most common, but it has a live connection to virtual reality. Video exports are really easy. Stereo panoramas with QR codes and a third-party tool such as Ulio to serve up interconnected stereo panoramas is a really great tool. That Ulio starts with a Y. EXE exports, which are really great way to share the experience of Enscape plus your model in a packaged file on a computer that doesn't even have to have ArchiCAD, Revit, SketchUp, or Enscape. There's a way to host an Enscape model on the web. And here's a short URL to a hosted model if you want to have a look at it. There's a lot of ways in which you can very accurately represent your model as well. So light fixtures can support photometry, IES files, displacement maps, realistic 3D grass generated automatically, water, high quality assets, and even custom assets. Custom skyboxes using 360 cameras and video textures and animated vegetation and water, both on screen, in VR, and in videos. Here's an example where I show how you can take some manufacturer information for glazing and apply that very accurate visual light transmittance, visual light reflectance, and the material color of the glass to get realistic results within the Enscape environment. The model I'm actually going to show today is from my interior design using Autodesk Revit 2022 textbook. This book promotes using manufacturer content and covers scheduling that content for both quantities and cost. It also discusses downloading the content, which can be tricky in a printed book because, as you can imagine, manufacturers are constantly changing model numbers and discontinuing things and to make room for better, newer products. But nonetheless, it's an important thing for students to learn and understand when they get into the marketplace. And then this cover, as all my covers are actually rendered in Enscape. And I forgot to mention the picture at the beginning there was me biking in the winter, and I've biked back when I lived in Minnesota to close to 20 below, which is minus 29 Celsius. Can't bike any colder than that because the gears freeze up or the grease freezes up in the bike and the bike doesn't work anymore. So while I talk, I'm actually opening the Revit model, and then I'm opening Enscape just to show that it's a fairly quick process. About the time it takes to open the Revit model, you can also open this real-time visualization experience in Enscape. So once Enscape opens, we have some help information if you haven't used it before to get you going quickly. I'm going to close that and quickly reset the environment. And I can change it to ultra for quality. And then if I just move forward here for a moment, this isn't necessarily part of the manufacturing or manufacturer content, but you can see outside, it's just showing the horizon. So Enscape has a nice set of backgrounds that you can use, or you can use a custom one if you have a 360 camera, which is quite nice. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is the manufacturer content that's in this particular model. I'm going to go down the hall here. You can see some recessed can lights on the ceiling there. We're going to go right into the break room and notice a few things. Naturally, one of the benefits, the value proposition of using manufacturer content is it's their content. So they've likely spent a lot of time making it the right size and shape and orientation and materials. And so here we can see some content, and Enscape actually lets us dig into some of that data without having to go back to the BIM platform. So I'm going to click on this little BIM icon in the upper left. And if I select one of these chairs, all the properties associated with that Revit content shows up here. So if I go down to identity data, we can see manufacturer is Steelcase and the product line is Coalesce and the model is Cart. If I select the table, we can see the same thing. We might notice this table looks a little tall. So I can go back to Revit and pick a different table just to see how quickly this will update. So I'm going to edit this group, pick the table, and here's all the same information that we were able to see that was provided by this Steelcase and Coalesce content that was downloaded from their website. I'll pick a different table that's only 24 inches tall, and you see it shift, which is occasionally a problem with any content if the insertion point hasn't been defined in a consistent way, like the center of the table, for example. It might shift. Usually it works out quite well. And so now switching back, we can see that the table already updated. And again, we can use the BIM information to verify that. This is a great thing that you can do when you're presenting to a client. If they have questions about cost, if you've embedded cost in here. As you can see, I have $1,946 or any other metrics associated with that particular content. If we take a look at the ceiling, you can see there's USG three-dimensional ceiling tiles that have been added to this space. We could select those and see information about that. But next, we're going to go take a look at some lighting fixture information. So here's a spotlight or a track light. Hopefully I'm not making anybody too dizzy. I should point out that I'm actually using this 3D connection 3D mouse. You can use the keyboard, a combination of the keyboard and mouse to navigate in a similar way, but in my opinion, not quite as smooth. So I'm going to go back to the BIM information. I'm going to select this light fixture, and we'll see it's the manufacturer under identity data is Cooper Industries. And here's some information about this particular fixture. And if we scroll all the way down, we'll see photometrics. This is all the photometry information, the color temperature, the actual IES file that was selected is listed here. So just to go back and see some of that information in Revit. we'll have a look at this section, which has the light source turned on in this view and some dimensions related to its position. So this light source is projecting light, and Enscape actually uses that photometry to properly define the light as it comes out of the fixture. The next thing that we'll look at, and if I press the space bar at any time, I stick to the ground. So I am at eye level. We'll go into this workroom and have a look at the casework. And there's a few things that we'll notice here. We'll notice that some shelving is missing. Like any good cooking show, I set up a little bit of a problem here. So there's some casework that was placed at the wrong elevation. You can actually see the bottom of it up in the ceiling. So if I go to my floor plan back in Revit and turn off cropping for this view for a moment, we'll see that there's some casework. Somehow it got placed incorrectly in the plan view. I'm going to adjust that so those drop into the right place, and those just updated in real time. What's also interesting about this is if you were doing this with a client, you could be making adjustments to the design and the client can see these changes in real time, even if they had a VR headset on. Here's the little icon to toggle into VR. So if this computer had Oculus Rift or a Quest 2 attached to it, the client could see those changes in real time as well. Another thing we might notice is the color of the sash. If we wanted to change that, the great thing about this BIM platform is that anywhere you can see something, you can change it and know it's going to be updated correctly, because we're working with what I like to call a single source of truth. There's not a separate representation for that content. So if we quickly go into Revit's provided materials and just do a quick search for paint, and maybe that's actually a metal window frame. So I'll click that enamel, white enamel paint. And we can see that's already been updated. A little harder to represent when you're working on one screen for a presentation. But so you also might decide that having this cabinet in front of this window isn't quite desirable. You might see this cabinet sticking out and wonder if it was positioned properly in plan. So all these things you can check really quickly, and we see that this is just a deeper cabinet to support the paper trays here, perhaps. The last thing that we'll have a look at is some aluminum manufactured doors down here at the end of this hallway. And actually, I'm going to have a look to the left here. Here's some more of that 3D ceiling tile. I just want to point out there's a video texture. So you can see on this large flat screen, there's a video playing in the Enscape environment. So here we have a manufactured door, and to have a little different look at that, I'm going to go into my level 1 floor plan and just show you how we can do a quick cutaway view. So I'm going to select all this information and use Revit's section box command. And then on the Enscape tab, I'm going to tell Enscape to use this view instead of the view that we started in the lobby. And so we have this nice cutaway view. And actually, if you have a look at the bar joist here, you only see the top and bottom part of the framing. And that's because Enscape honors Revit's level of detail setting, which can make Enscape faster, but not look as interesting. So now we have the bar webbing showing up. We might also want to set this to be just a white background for this particular look at the model. And again, we can go to the BIM setting, pick the door, see lots of information about the door itself. So the manufacturer is FCO. It's a curtain wall manufacturer here in the US. We can come in and look at things inside the room. If we go up into the ceiling space, because of Enscape's really good auto exposure, there's no light sources in here and it's a completely closed environment, but because of the auto exposure, it makes it still totally legible. We can see the ductwork and the light fixtures and the beam. Everything is not conflicting, which is good. We come down here and look at the skirting or the baseboard and notice it doesn't go around this bump out in the column. And this is the last thing I'm going to show you, is that we can add, we can do issue tracking within Enscape, which also ties into a third-party manufacturer or software tool called BIM Track, but Enscape also just supports their own issue tracking. So I can write something like baseboard issue, and then I can even pick on that item that's under consideration. And then later somebody can come back and switch this to in progress when they're fixing the baseboard in Revit. And then they can set it to done once that's been created or once that's been completed. I'm going to click the create button now to create that issue. And then that's saved in the Revit model. So anytime somebody opens Enscape from this Revit model, they'll be able to see these issues and quickly navigate back to them. So that's my quick demo of visualization in the context in particular of the MBS topic here of manufacture content and not just being about 3D. Back to you, Lee.
Thanks very much, Dan. I'm just going to wrap up now. So we've seen how getting added to the spec, the scheduling, the visualization from things like improving snagging, getting the design right, being able to talk the client through what you're doing is an absolute benefit of BIM content. But talking to clients, that also brings on another benefit. So reaching existing and new clients. So your existing clients, particularly the specifiers and the design community, are going to be moving to these tools if they haven't done already. MBS's industry survey that we do every year, and we've run the 10th National BIM Report now, annual BIM report, is suggesting that BIM's adopted by just over 70% of the sector. So it's there. But from my personal experience as a manufacturer, when we implemented all of this BIM content, going back sort of 5-6 years ago or more now, we were reaching clients with our manufacturers' objects that would never previously have maybe considered our brand. They were working in this new realm. We were on hand to help with it, and we had the content, and it met the relevant qualities because it had been built to the MBS standards. Dan showed in his slide just when the table jumped, and that is some of the key things to make sure that you get right. You need this continuity from things like insertion points and material finishes and so forth to make sure that whoever is using it gets the best experience. So you can reach new clients. You've just got to make sure that you've got the quality of the content there for them to have a good experience in the same way as your products would give them a good experience. Then lastly, linking to future requirements, particularly in the UK, there's obviously this big drive for safety and sustainability. With safety in particular, we've got the draft safety bill. We've got all the new Hackett stage gates coming in where the model and the as-built spec have got to be completely tied in together. Obviously, for the golden thread as a principle to work, manufacturers' product information, system information is absolutely paramount and fundamental for that work to work. So get your content right, whether it's embedded in the BIM object or whether that's just held digitally and can be a companion to the 3D objects. Having that data there for the specifiers to use in the scheduling and the snagging, etc., that we've just shown within the BIM environment is going to help you fulfill those needs. I'd just like to wrap up then and give a bit of a call to action. So in summary, what we've seen today is that there's a lot more to BIM content than just 3D files. There's the whole data side of things, the whole way that they can help the sector to improve design efficiency, make sure that things are correct first time. Instead of doing snagging on site, you can do that within the model. But ultimately, you can convey things like the design intent and stuff to the client a lot more straightforward. There's a whole host of different things and benefits as to why BIM content can help both manufacturers and specifiers alike. Product libraries or BIM libraries, as with any sort of one-stop shop, these offer a single source for specifiers, designers to actually get these objects. It can be very time consuming to go from one website to the next, searching for people that have got them. Whereas all under one roof, you can see who's got digital objects straight away, and you can download from hundreds, thousands of different manufacturers and thousands of different product specifications. As we've just seen, and as we've heard as well, the quality of the content really is absolutely critical. Dan mentioned about the shared parameters file that he was making freely available in the US. In the UK, MBS have our own MBS shared parameters file, which covers the data, the property side of things that go into the objects. Again, that's free to download at the mbs.com. But also as well, if you're looking for standardization and how to get the content structured, the MBS BIM object standard as well is free to download. If you visit source.thembs.com, so the MBS source website, scroll to the bottom, in the useful sort of bits and pieces that you can download, they're all listed there in that one place. For any marketeers that are listening, or sales teams that are saying, yeah, we want to know what are the benefits of BIM. If you're looking at going down this route and you haven't already, you really need to consider the technical aspect. So that example I gave where we had the CAD files or the stencil, and then we had the catalog or the website, a BIM model is effectively those things combined. So make sure that you've got your technical team on board, and please give them some allocated time to actually work with whoever's creating the files, whether it's themselves or whether it's a third party like MBS. As I mentioned, we offer a object authoring service, so if you're not sure how to go about creating your own objects, please drop us a note and we can help you with that. MBS Chorus and BIM software can actually place your products into the specification as well as the model. So dispelling that myth that, yeah, you could be in the model, but doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be in the spec. If you're using MBS, it's completely feasible and likely that both of those things are going to happen. And then lastly, Dan's absolutely stellar presentation there, showcasing tools like Enscape. These can bring your content to life virtually like you've never done before. And certainly this is going to help you win more orders, whatever field that you're working into. So on that note, if anybody would like to know more, just a recap of MBS's connected platforms. We offer RIBA CPD. If anybody's looking at providing CPD content, we actually make the provision for that. We have MBS Source, which is an online product library, and BIM Library. So if you're looking for BIM content or to host it, this is the place to be. And then lastly, we have MBS Chorus, which is the online specification tool that also plugs into the BIM software and can make those BIM models actually be synced to the specification. So yeah, so if anybody's interested in learning more a little bit about Enscape, the contact details are here, and the team there will be more than happy to help you on your virtual or rendering journey there with that. And anybody that'd like to know more about MBS and the products and services that we offer, whether that's BIM creation, hosting, or any of the specification elements that you saw, please feel free to drop us a note at manufacturers@thembs.com. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much to Dan from Lake Flato again. Thank you for Enscape for showcasing their tools. I've been Lee Jones, and I wish you all a pleasant day. Thank you very much.